So welcome everyone to our 2020 Christmas party, which is a Zoomed Christmas party of a read around of Dickens' Christmas Carol. And we're very lucky today to have with us a special guest, Ruth Giordano, who is going to direct us as we read. And I'm not sure everybody knows each other. Frony, I'm not sure how many people you know. So why don't we just start around? I don't know what order people are seeing it in, but I'll introduce you and you wave when I say your name. Margaret Howland.
Hi, Fronia.
Hi.
Judy Niffen. Ruth Olson. Julie Mackaman, sorry.
Julie Mackaman, who dressed up for her part.
She did.
Oh, Julie, you're too cute. Trust Julie coming through.
Patrick. Wave, Suzanne.
Oh, I didn't hear. I didn't hear my name.
Judy Murphy. Judy, wave. Claudia Dalton, we can't see your face.
Okay, hold on a sec.
Can we see your face?
Much better.
Nancy Shirky, wave your hand.
Gotcha.
Dawn Rodriguez, wave your hand.
She's
probably
listening
muted.
to Gloria.
Althea Church. Jennifer Kern. Yay. And everybody, the other one is Fronia. Fronia, wave back. Okay. So now we know who we are. And I suspect everybody who's coming is here by now. So I'm just going to turn this over at this point to Ruth and let her lead us through the rest of our day. Or not.
No. Thank you, Kathy. I'll start pretty much where I left off, but I wanted to say something. Kathy said I would direct you through the reading. I'm going to get you started. I'm going to join you. I'm going to read with you. But this is not a play for me to direct. This is a game for us to play. And a game of read around. We take turns reading aloud. And for those who are just joining us, I believe I could share the screen and we could get started. Let's say a few words about the screen to the guests. They might want to see. Oh, there I go again. Here we go. There. This is what we're going to be looking at. If anybody can't see it, please tell me now. I get silent. I hope I haven't muted you. Someone speak to me so I make sure I can hear you.
We're good.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
It's 2:15.
Yes, it's 2:15.
Sorry about that.
Is that somebody's? Yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to try to turn off extraneous because some of us are easily distractible. As you see at the top right, over here, you see Julie's name and a wingding. Julie will read this part until the next symbol when Claudia will come in. And I intend to scroll slowly for you. Okay? So let's have fun. Let's take our time with it. Let's go from top to bottom. I figure everybody kind of knows the story, so you can play with it if you want to.
Let me say, if I'm going to mute everyone who's not reading, and when we finish, I'll have you unmute so we can.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Good idea.
Yeah.
And stay with us when we're finished and we can talk a little bit about it and explore a possible option of doing something like this more frequently. So, okay, I'll shut up.
Well, thank you, Kathy, for even saying that, because that's on my mind, and I am awfully glad to join you, clubbies. I will say the title, and then we'll begin. A Christmas Carol, a ghost story in 5 staves.
Stave 1, Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. Scrooge and Marley were partners for I don't know how many years. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted at the grindstone, was Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner.
Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, upon a Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting, foggy weather, and the city clocks had just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open, that he might keep an eye upon his clerk, who in a dismal little cell beyond was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. And so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part. Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of a strong imagination, he failed.
Quite suddenly, the front door opened. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, Fred. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" "Christmas a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I am sure." "I do. Out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer? If I had my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should." "Uncle!" "Nephew, keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine." "Keep it, but you don't keep it." "Let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you. Much good it has ever done you."
There are many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited, I dare say, Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought Christmas was a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year, when men and women people seem to open and shut their hearts freely, to think to people below them as if they really were fellow travelers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on their journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done good and will do me good. And I say, God bless it.
The clerk in the next room involuntarily applauded. "God bless Christmas! Hurrah! Let me hear another sound from you, Bob Cratchit, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation." "Oh, don't be angry, Uncle. I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends? Good afternoon. I'm sorry, with all my heart, to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel to which I have been a party. I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last and wish you a Merry Christmas, Uncle. Good afternoon, and a Happy New Year." "Good afternoon." His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding.
Judy here?
Good afternoon. It's
Oh,
Gloria.
good afternoon, Gloria.
Hello.
Judy Niffen?
Pardon me?
There's someone in the waiting room. I'll admit them. There wasn't a name, just a number.
Yeah.
Oh, that
It
was,
sounded like Gloria Alexander.
yeah. Well,
Yes, it is. It's Gloria. Hello, all.
hi.
Hello.
We're doing our program now.
What happened to Judy? Oh, there she is.
Can we hear you speak, Judy?
But she's muted, Kathy.
Unmute yourself, Judy.
There you go.
In letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen who now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They bowed to him. Scrooge and Marley's, I believe, said one of the gentlemen. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there no prisons? Well, plenty of prisons, but under the impression that they scarcely furnish cheer of mind or body to the unoffending multitude, a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time of all others when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? Nothing. You wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone. Since you asked me what I wish, gentlemen, this is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the prisons and the workhouses. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Many can't go there, and many would rather die. Well, if they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. And now, sirs, I have my work to do. Cratchit, show these gentlemen to the door. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived.
With an ill will, Scrooge, dismounting from his stool, tacitly admitted the fact to the clerk, who was instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat.
Ruth.
Yes.
There's another Ruth who's planning to read, Ruth Olson.
Oh.
Forgive me.
Oh. Okay. It is not convenient and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself mightily ill-used, I'll be bound. Well, sir, and yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work. It's only once a year, sir. A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning. The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl.
The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, ran home as hard as he could pelt. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern and went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. The building was old enough now and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all let out as offices.
Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door of this house. And yet Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face with a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious. It looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up upon its ghostly forehead. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. He said, "Pooh, pooh," and closed the door with a bang. The sound echoed through the house like thunder. But Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candles as he went.
Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for its being very dark. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was all right. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up on a suspicious attitude against the wall. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. He took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before a very low fire to take his gruel.
As he sat back in his chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room for some purpose now forgotten. It was with great astonishment and with an inexplicable dread that, as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. Soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This was succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over floor of the cellar. Then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. It came on through the heavy door, and a specter passed into the room before his eyes. And upon its coming in, Scrooge recognized him. Jacob Marley. Marley, in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights, and boots. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the two buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now.
"How now," said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?" "Much," Marley's voice, "no doubt about it." "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Who were you then?" "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. You don't believe me." "I don't." "What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?" "I don't know." "What do you doubt? Why do you doubt your senses?"
Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes, nor did he feel in his heart by any means waggish then. The truth is that he tried to be smart as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his horror. But how much greater was his horror when, the phantom taking off the bandage round its head, as if it were too warm to wear indoors, its lower jaw dropped down upon its breast. "Mercy! Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me? Why do spirits walk the earth, and why did they come to me?"
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me. 7 years dead and traveling all that time? You travel fast. On the wings of the wind. You might have got over a great quantity of ground in 7 years. Oh, blind man. Not to know that any Christmas spirit working kindly in its little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life's opportunities misused. Yet I was like this man. I was once like this man. But you were always a good man of business, Jacob, faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. Business, cried the ghost, wringing his hands again. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business.
Scrooge was very much dismayed to hear the spectre going on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly. Hear me, my time is nearly gone. I will, but don't be hard upon me. Don't be flowery, Jacob, pray. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer. You are always a good friend to me, thank ye. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? I think I'd rather not. Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow night, when the bell tolls 1. Expect the second on the next night, at the same hour. The third upon the next night, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake, you remember what has passed between us. It walked backward from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the apparition reached it, it was wide open.
Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. Scrooge tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable, and being, from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigue of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, he went straight to bed, and without undressing, and fell asleep on the instant.
Stave 2, the first of the 3 spirits. Scrooge awoke. Suddenly the church clock tolled a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy one. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside by a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age. And yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. It held a branch of fresh green holly in its hand, and in singular contradiction of that wintry emblem, had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light by which all of this was visible.
Are you the spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me? I am. Who and what are you? I am the ghost of Christmas past. Long past? No, your past. Scrooge then made bold to inquire what business brought him there. Your welfare, rise and walk with me. Scrooge rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped its robe in supplication. No, spirit, not out the window. I'm a mortal and liable to fall. Bear but touch of my hand there, said the spirit, laying it upon his heart, and you will be upheld in more than this. As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood in the busy thoroughfare of a city. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Christmas time.
The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. Know it? I was apprenticed here. They went in. At the sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig, Scrooge cried in great excitement, "Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig, alive again!" Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, laughed all over himself, and called out in a comfortable, jovial voice, "Yo-ho there, Ebenezer, Dick." A living and moving picture of Scrooge's former self, a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow prentice. "Dick Wilkins, to be sure," said Scrooge to the ghost. "My old fellow prentice, bless me, yes, poor Dick, dear, dear." "Yo-ho, my boys," said Fezziwig. "No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick, Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up and clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here."
It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off, the floor was swept, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was snug and warm and dry and bright, a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young fellows whose heart they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. And in they all came, anyhow and everyhow. There were dances and more dances. There was cake, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer.
A small matter, said the ghost, to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. Small matter? Small indeed. Isn't it? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise? It isn't that, spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, in things so slight and insignificant that it's impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives us is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. What's the matter? Nothing particular. Something, I think. No. I should be like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all. My time grows short, and we have yet another visit to make. Where now? Quickly, come.
Again, Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a black dress, in whose eyes there were tears. "It matters little," she said softly to Scrooge's former self. "To you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve." "What idol has displaced you?" "A golden one. You fear the world too much. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. What then? Even if I've grown so much wiser, what then? I'm not changed towards you. Have I ever sought release from our engagement? In words, no, never. Well, in what then? In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in everything that made my love of any value in your sight. So I release you from your promise with a full heart for the love of him you once were.
Spirit, remove me from this place. I told you these were shadows of the things that have been, said the ghost. That they are what they are, do not blame me. Remove me, I cannot bear it. Leave me, take me back, haunt me no longer. As he struggled with the spirit, he was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.
Day 3, the second of 3 spirits. Scrooge awoke in his bedroom. There was no doubt about that. But the bedroom and the adjoining sitting room had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were so hung with living green that it looked like a perfect grove. Leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light as if many little mirrors had been scattered there. A mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney. Heaped upon the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, red hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, and great bowls of punch. In easy state upon his couch there sat a giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and who raised it high to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door.
Come in and know me better, man. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. You have never seen the like of me before. Never. You're different from the other spirit. So tall, almost a giant. And that great torch you carry. Its light pours into the homes of rich and poor alike. Spirit, conduct me where you will. From the first spirit, I learned a lesson which is working now. If you have something to teach me, let me profit by it. Touch my robe. Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast. The room and its contents all vanished instantly, and they stood in the city streets upon a snowy Christmas morning. Scrooge and the ghost passed on, invisible, straight to Scrooge's clerk's house, and on the threshold of the door, the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinklings of his torch.
Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, dressed out in a worn gown, brave in ribbons, which made a goodly show for sixpence, and she laid the cloth, assisted by the second of her daughters, Belinda Cratchit, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes. Two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelled the goose and known it for their own, and basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onion, they danced about the table.
Wherever is your precious father then, said Mrs. Cratchit, and your brother, Tiny Tim, and where is our Martha? Here's your Martha, mother, said a girl, appearing at the door. Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are, said Mrs. Cratchit, kissing her a dozen times and taking off her shawl and bonnet for her. We'd a deal of work to finish up last night, replied the girl, and had to clear away this morning, mother. Well, never mind so long as you've come, said Mrs. Cratchit. Sit ye down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm, Lord bless ye. Father's coming, cried the two young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once. Hide, Martha, hide.
So Martha hid herself, and in came Bob with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas, for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch and had his limbs supported by an iron frame. Why, where's our Martha? Cried Bob Cratchit, looking round. Not coming, said Mrs. Cratchit, feigning sorrow. Not coming on Christmas Day? Martha didn't like to see him disappointed, even if it were only in jest. So she came out from behind the closet door and ran into his arms. Bob hugged his eldest daughter to his heart's content.
And how did little Tim behave in church? Asked Mrs. Cratchit. As good as gold, said Bob, and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you've ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in church. When I asked him why, he said because he was crippled, and it might be pleasant to see them to remember upon Christmas Day who it was that made lame beggars walk and blind men to see. Bob's voice was tremulous when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty.
Tim's little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came he before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool beside the fire. While Bob compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons and stirred it round and put it on the hob to simmer, Master Peter and the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose from the baker's, with which they soon returned in high procession.
Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor. Miss Belinda sweetened up the applesauce. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. The two young Cratchits sat in chairs for everyone, not forgetting themselves, and mounting guard upon their posts, crammed spoons into their mouths, lest they should shriek for goose before their turn came to be helped. At last the dishes were set on, and grace was said. It was followed by a breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it in the breast. And when she did, one murmur of delight rose all around the board. There never was such a goose, trimmed out with applesauce and mashed potatoes. It was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight, surveying one small atom of a bone upon the dish, they hadn't ate it all. And yet everyone had had enough, and the youngest Cratchits in particular were steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrows.
But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witness, to take the pudding up and bring it in. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit was back, flushed, but smiling proudly with the pudding, blazing in a half a quarter of ignited brandy and bedight with Christmas holly stuck into the top. Oh, a wonderful pudding, Bob Cratchit said, and calmly too, that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit said that now the weight was off her mind, she would confess that she had had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought it was at all a small pudding for a large family. Any Cratchit would have blushed to hit such a thing. At last, the dinner was all done. The cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The compound in the jug being tasted and considered perfect. Apples and oranges were put upon the table, and a shovelful of chestnuts on the fire.
Then all the Cratchit family drew round the hearth, and at Bob Cratchit's elbow stood the family display of glass, 2 tumblers and a custard cup without a handle. These held the hot stuff from the jug, as well as golden goblets would have done, and Bob served it out with beaming looks while the chestnuts on the fire sputtered and crackled noisily. Then Bob proposed, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us," which all the family re-echoed. "God bless us, everyone," said Tiny Tim, the last of all. He sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he dreaded that Tim might be taken from him. "A toast to Mr. Scrooge," said Bob. "I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast."
Scrooge raised his head speedily on hearing his own name. "The founder of the feast, indeed," cried Mrs. Cratchit, reddening. "I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon and hope he'd have a good appetite for it." "My dear," said Bob, "the children, Christmas Day." "It should be Christmas Day, I'm sure," she said, "on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow. My dear, Christmas Day. I'll drink his health for your sake, and the day's not for his. Long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He may be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt." "And say God bless him too, Mother," piped up Tiny Tim, "and everyone."
There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof, and their clothes were scanty. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they faded, looking happier yet in the then they faded, looking happier yet in the bright sprinklings of the spirit's torch at parting. Scrooge had his eye on them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. Then he and the spirit were again upon their travels.
Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful. On foreign lands, and they were close at home. By poverty, and it was rich. In hospital and jail, in misery, every refuge, he left his blessing, and Scrooge began to learn from him. Suddenly, as they stood together in an open place, the bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it no more. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, held a solemn phantom draped and hooded, coming slowly toward him, gravely, silently, like a mist along the ground.
Stave 4, the last of the spirits. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of its visible save one outstretched hand. It neither spoke nor moved. I am the presence of the ghost of the Christmas yet to come, ghost of the future. I fear you more than any specter I have seen, but as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?" It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them. Lead on, the night is fast waning, and it is precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit."
They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them. But there they were in the heart of it, amongst the merchants. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. No, said the great fat man with a monstrous chin. I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead. When did he die? Inquired another. Last night, I believe. Why? What was the matter with him? I thought he'd never die. God knows, said the first with a yawn. What has he done with his money? Asked a red-faced gentleman. I haven't heard, said the man with a large chin. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know. Bye-bye.
Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to a conversation apparently so trivial. But feeling assured that it must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what that purpose was likely to be. It could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost's province was the future. They left this busy scene and went to an obscure part of the town, to a low shop where iron, old rags, bottles, and bones were bought. A gray-haired rascal of great age sat smoking his pipe.
Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. She had scarcely entered when another woman, similarly laden, came in too, and she was closely followed by a man in faded black. After a short period of blank astonishment, they all three burst into a laugh. Look here, old Joe, said the first woman. Here's a chance. If we haven't all three met here without meaning it. Hey, you could have met in a better place. What have you got to sell? What have you got to sell? Half a minute, please. Half a minute's patience, Joe, and you shall see. What odds then? What odds, Mrs. Dilber, said the woman. Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose. If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, the wicked old screw, why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there, alone by himself. The truest word that was ever spoke. It's a judgment on him. I wish it was a little heavier judgment, and it should have been. But now, old Joe, open that bundle and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it.
Joe went down on his knees for the greater convenience of opening the bundle and dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff. What do you call this? Bed curtains. Aye, bed curtains and blankets as well. His blankets? Who else's do you think? He isn't likely to take cold without him, I dare say. And you may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, nor a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one too. They have wasted it by dressing him up in it, if it hadn't been for me. Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror. Spirit, I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven.
God, how to get us back. Me back.
The ghost then conducted him to poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were still as statues in one corner and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before them. The mother and her daughters were engaged in needlework, but surely they were very quiet.
Peter read aloud from the book, and he took a child and set him in the midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard those words? He had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out as he and the spirit crossed the threshold. Why did he not go on and read more? The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand up to her face. "Oh, the color hurts my eyes," she said. "It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home. It must be near his time." "Past it, rather," Peter answered, shutting the book. "But I think he has walked a little slower than he used these few last evenings, Mother. I have known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed." "And so have I," cried Peter. "But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so that it was no trouble. But listen, there is your father at the door." She hurried out to meet him. "You're very late today, my dear." "Yes, my dear," returned Bob. "I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child, my little child." He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it.
"Spectre," said Scrooge, "something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how." The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him to a dismal, wretched, ruinous churchyard. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one of them. "Before I draw nearer to see that stone to which you point, answer me one question. Are these shadows of things that will be, or are they shadows of the things that may be only?" Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. "Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends, to which, if persevered in, they must lead. But if the courses are departed from, the ends will change. Say it is thus with what you show to me." The spirit was as immovable as ever.
Scrooge crept towards the gravestone, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. "Oh, no, no, Spirit, hear me. I'm not the man that I was. Why show me this, if I'm past all hope? Tell me that I may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall thrive within me. I shall not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone." Holding up his hands in one last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw the phantom's hood and cloak shrink, collapse, and dwindle down into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in.
Suddenly, the churches rang out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, no night. Clear, bright, golden day. He saw a boy running down the lane below. "Hey, boy! Oh, boy!" "Yes, sir." "What's today?" cried Scrooge. "Eh? What's today, my fine fellow?" "Today? Why, it's Christmas Day." "It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. Hello, my fine fellow. Hello. Do you know the Poulters in the next street but one at the corner?" "I should hope I did." Oh, an intelligent boy, a remarkable boy.
Scrooge continued, "Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one." "What? The one as big as me?" "What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck, the one as big as you. It's hanging there now." Is it? Go and buy it. The boy was struck dumb for a moment. He thought the old man was trying to play a trick on him. No, no, I'm in earnest. Go and buy it. Tell him to bring it here, that I may tell them where to take it. Come back with the man and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you a crown, half a crown. The boy was off like a shot. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's. He shan't know who sends it.
Scrooge dressed himself all in his best and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir, a Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the sweet sounds he had ever heard, these were the sweetest.
Next morning, he was early at the office. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late, that was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. The clock struck 9. No Bob. A quarter past. No Bob. Bob was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come in. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake the time. "Hello," growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice. "What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?" "I am very sorry, sir. I am behind my time." "You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, if you please." "It's only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir." "Yes, well, now, I'll tell you what, my friend, I am not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore," Scrooge continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob a dig at his waistcoat, "and therefore I am about to raise your salary."
Bob trembled and blinked his eyes in disbelief. "A Merry Christmas, Bob," said Scrooge with an enormous earnestness that could not be mistaken as he clapped him on the back. "A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and try to help your struggling family, and we'll discuss your efforts this very afternoon over a bowl of hot Christmas punch. Make up the fires and bring a second coal shuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit."
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the change in him, but his own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him.
He had no further business with spirits, and it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. If any man alive possessed the knowledge, may that truly be said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.
That was so nice.
That was great.
That was really nice.
Yes. Thank you, Ruth.
Oh, thank you.
Thank
lady.
you, Ruth.
Thank you.
That was fun.
If we aren't in the Christmas spirit now, there's no hope for us.
That's right. That's right.
Let's say hi to Gloria. She's on the phone.
Hi, Gloria.
Hi, Gloria.
She's
Oh,
muted.
she's muted.
Gloria.
Wait till I unmute her.
Uh-oh.
Can we unmute her?
I'm asking her to unmute, but I don't know how to unmute her.
Yeah, and I muted her way back. Darn. Unmute.
If you hit participants, you might see a list of names.
It's different with the
There.
bumpers.
There, now she's unmuted.
Oh,
Hi,
good.
Hi,
Gloria.
Gloria. Hi,
Yes,
Gloria.
yes.
Hi,
Yes.
Gloria.
Oh, hello all. I wish I could see you, but I could recognize voices, and it was a lovely reading. And put me in the mood.
That story
Thank
never
you.
gets old, never.
No, no,
Oh,
no.
It's a
No.
gem.
I think you all read that it was originally cut by Dickens himself to perform, and he went all over New England performing it.
Oh.
Cut it a little bit more for us to make it not too tedious to read, but I think it was great. It was great fun.
It was very nicely done, and I certainly couldn't tell any difference between Dickens' work and anybody else's.
Well, I'm very strict with myself. It's very, very rare that I add even a word or two. I'll trim. I'll just
Yeah, the trimming was good.
You know, to make, but the overall, as Kathy said, the overall cutting and deciding what scenes we're going to be in and what we're going to be out, that was Charles Dickens' work.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he decided how to abridge his story to present it as a read aloud
Yeah.
solo. He would go solo, stand at a podium, gesticulate, change his voice.
And that was it? The one we used was it?
Yep.
Oh, very nice to know that.
Oh, how can we get a copy of
I
that?
know, that's what I was
I'd like to use it with my granddaughters.
I'll send it to you.
That would be good. Thank you.
Actually, what I might do is put it out on the web. Well,
Would you do that?
I can put it out on the website and everybody can pull it from there.
That
would be nice.
Super.
That'd
That
be
would
very
be
nice.
super.
Or I'll send it to Dawn, who can do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't care. Her helper.
I have a question for everybody. I'm going to turn the recording off now.
Okay.